Hello, my name is Natalia and I work at Taraloka Buddhist Retreat Centre for Women. And today I'm going to be speaking with Kamala Gita, who is going to be running an introductory weekend for us in November. Kamala Gita is the author of the Mindful Teacher's Handbook. She's a Buddhist practitioner with 25 years of experience. She's also a qualified teacher and lecturer and the educational lead for Mindfulness in Action and a lead trainer for Mindfulness in Schools project. So today we're going to be talking a bit about her book and a bit about how teachers can practice mindfulness in the incredibly relentless school environment, as well as actually how these practices are applicable to anybody with a busy life. So stay tuned, and it's going to be a really good conversation. All right, so yes, I was wondering if you might say a little bit about how it was that you got involved with meditation and Buddhism, and actually, is there a difference between meditation and Buddhism?
Oh, that's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I've been involved with meditation and Buddhism for 27 years now. So I started when I was 23, and I just moved to London. I just graduated, and graduation is one of those times where, when you're in college, you've got a very structured environment, even if that means getting up at midday, it's still a sort of
Mm-hmm.
structured environment. And I'd moved to London, and I was sort of at that kind of crossroads now. What do I do with my life? And in the absence of any better answer, I just got into partying loads and, having lots of fun in a very sort of decadent sort of way. But I noticed that, I noticed my mood was declining, and I thought, I think I need to do something about this, but I didn't know what. And then I went to the gym one day, and I met this somebody I'd met at a party before, but she was at the gym. And I said to her, "What are you up to now?" And she said, "Oh, I'm going to Bethnal Green." And I said, "Why are you going up there?" Because we lived in Brixton. It was a long way away. And she said, "Oh, because I'm a Buddhist. I meditate. That's what I do." And I thought immediately, like, bam, I've got to learn to
Mm-hmm.
meditate. I've got to get up to that Buddhist center, wherever it is. So I went up the next day. I mean, luckily in the LBC, they do a lunchtime class, or they used to do a lunchtime meditation class every day. So I went up there and learned the Met Bhavana, which is a meditation to do with kindness. And, it wasn't, I didn't have this kind of epiphany or whatever, but for the best, for the first time in a while, I felt really well, mentally well after doing this meditation. So I thought, I've just got to follow this up, really. So it all happened then quite organically, just finding out a bit more, realizing that I really was aligned with what I was learning about, finding out a bit more, interest deepening and things like that. And yeah, the question about meditation and Buddhism. So of course there are many different forms of meditation, and all the great world religions have some sort of history of contemplation. Um, so yeah, there's lots of different forms of meditation, aren't there? I had dabbled with meditation before going to this meditation class. I'd looked at a candle and those sorts of things, there's yogic meditations. But I suppose what Buddhism gives us is this path, that we can take one step at a time and find out more and deepen our understanding. So that worked for me. That's what I felt helpful, and that's why 27 years later I'm still here.
Great. I think a lot of us are probably really familiar with these images of sort of these monks with shaved heads and, kind of people that are living a very monastic, uh, renunciant sort of life. And, well, I'm kind of getting this sense that that might not be the life that you've lived. How does it apply? How relevant is it for people in the everyday world? People with jobs and families, and so on.
Well, I have all those things. I have a job, I have a family, all those sorts of things. So yeah, I think we've got an image from the traditional Buddhist East, which um, I haven't done any research on this, but it would be interesting to find out the stats about how many people meditate in, the traditionally Buddhist countries, and how many people meditate in what we'd call the West now,
Mm.
Europe, America. Be interesting to find that out. So I would say, yes, meditation can have a really important place in our everyday lives. And I think it's almost crucial, really, to have some sort of way of finding quiet, calm, and taking a step back, because life is so hectic, and the message we have really is that we should be stimulated 24 hours a day.
Mm, mm.
I've got a son and he's 14, and it's really hard to sort of help him find that space, because a lot of teenagers now, it's all about the form and all about that stimulation, and the idea that you would be bored, as I was as a teenager a lot, is just an anathema, really. So life is speeding up, and yet, in some ways we've still got the brains that we had 2,500 years ago. So uh, people are stressed, people have anxiety, people have depression. So I think if you are struggling with any of those things, or just struggling with the sense that you're on this hamster wheel,
Mm.
then looking into meditation can be a really good thing to do. And you can start quite small. You can start with just a few minutes a day. That will bear fruit. And I think that a lot with meditation, what develops meditation is, instead of thinking, right, I'm going to sit for 40 minutes, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes, it's more about, okay, let's do a few minutes. And from that few minutes, usually people get a sense of, calming down, quiet, focus, feeling grounded, and then they just naturally want to do a bit more. They're enjoying being in that space. So the book that I wrote, that Mindful Teacher's Handbook
Mm.
for teachers, I mean, one of the main complaints I have from teachers, and you'll recognize this, Natalia, is that they have no time. They have
Mm.
no time. So how do you say to somebody who maybe can't even get to the loo for 3 hours, because they're so busy in a school day, you need to meditate? So the way to do that is to find some sort of way to weave it into the school life and the everyday home life.
Yeah, so how do people do that? I was just thinking about this book that you've written, which is fantastic. I think it's a really pragmatic approach to the kinds of things that teachers come up against, every day, like inspections and observations, or behavior management incidents in the classroom. And yeah, having been a teacher myself, I'm really aware of the intensity and relentlessness of the school day and of the life around the school day, sort of going home and doing marking and lesson planning. And how do you find a way to meditate, or to embed mindfulness practices into your life if you've got a life that is that busy?
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, you just asked about meditation and Buddhism, and I think this is maybe where the two come together. If we think about the Buddha's teachings on Satipatthana, so awareness and mindfulness and continuity of purpose, then really what that means is being aware of what we're doing when we're doing it. And so that can include formal meditation, but the Buddha talked about, we practice awareness where we're sitting, walking, lying down, and standing. So that, that pretty much, those kind of postures take up the whole of life. We're usually doing one or the other. So I think it is about starting to grow that faculty of awareness that we all have. And in my book, one of the first chapters, I talk about this sense of creating the weather in the classroom, and this sense of kind of mood, that as you know, Natalia, schools are very unrelenting environments. And if it's just as soon as you get in every day, you're just on this treadmill of different activities, then no wonder that when you're spat out at the end of the day, one can feel exhausted and drained and not have any kind of energy to do anything else. So I think it's really important to learn how to build this faculty of awareness and learn how to pay attention, actually. I mean, that's something we say to the children a lot, pay attention, but we kind of need to teach them how to pay attention. And as adults, we need the same, because we're not immune to this 24-hour stimulation. So yeah, I think it's really, really important. And so going back to this idea of the weather in the classroom, if you can spend, as an educator, if you can spend a few minutes each morning before you go in, just sort of collecting yourself, really, just taking the temperature, if you like. It's not about fixing it, it's not about solving it, but it's about realizing, oh, I didn't sleep very well last night and I'm feeling a bit tired and I'm a bit groggy. Okay, I need to be aware of that, I need to take care of that before we go in. Then that stops a lot less incidents of what we call reacting, which is that kind of knee-jerk reaction. We've done it, we've said something, we've shouted, we've done something before we even realized. And the reason why that's important is, one is that, we're social emotional animals, so we're constantly picking up cues from each other and things like that. So the young people will be picking up cues from us. But also the young people have their own weather systems going on. Maybe they've had a fight with their parents this morning, or their parents have had a fight with each other, or something has happened where, they're off kilter as well. So then if, you can see what's going to happen, there's going to be this clash. So by taking those few moments to become aware, you can save a lot of time later on, not having to sort out incidents. So it's this thing about I think we just get into a false economy when we feel time poor, of I haven't got time, and yet creating time in this way. And let's face it, many of us are on our phones a lot, scrolling or watching rubbish on telly or whatever. So we do have some time. So it's about being able to use that time in a constructive way that's going to nourish us.
As a teacher, there can be kind of a sense of, this is an issue and how are we going to fix it? And one of the things that I was kind of quite interested in when I was reading your book was that what you're offering in terms of mindfulness for teachers seems like it's helpful more in the sense of the way that teachers resource themselves. Yeah, and I was wondering if you might say a little bit about that dichotomy that we can have in life between times when we just need kind of a quick fix, a little bit of a strategy, and times when there's sort of needs to be a kind of a deeper resourcing going on.
Yeah. So in the chapters, I've got several chapters on difficulty, really. I've sort of framed them around things like observations and inspections and things like that. But really, they can be about any, and communication, but really they can be around any sort of form of difficulty. So in some ways, you could liken the two approaches to samatha and vipassana that we have in the Buddhist tradition. So samatha is one image I love for samatha is, so you've got dry soil and the rain comes down and it moistens the soil and you can really work with the soil, and samatha, that sense of calming, finding quiet, sort of bringing everything together, resetting ourselves. That's there in mindfulness. But also, and again, this goes right back to the roots of the Satipatthana. There's that element of mindfulness then, which is clear comprehension and stepping back. And this is what I try to communicate in those chapters about difficulties, because sometimes there is a fix for something, but often there's not. And because again, in schools, we're dealing with relationships, we're dealing with human beings in all their complexity. And human beings don't do well with being fixed, I've found over my many years of life and work. So what happens when we've got a difficult situation that can't be solved? Well, usually what happens is we're left with the feelings of that, and the kind of residue of that. And we tend then to do what human beings do, which is we either try and push it away, there's like an aversion, or there's some sort of attaching ourselves to it. So overthinking might be a way of attaching yourself. You're gonna figure this thing out. You're gonna think and think and think and think until you figure it out. And what happens is usually just run yourself ragged, exhausted. So the kind of wisdom perspective is to step back, to realize, okay, this is difficult. And guess what the first noble truth is, right? Life is difficult. It's not just me, it's not my fault. It's just that life is difficult, I sometimes talk to the teachers about the higher teaching of shit happens, completely outside our control. But then it's what we do with that. And if we treat ourselves in a sort of uncompassionate way, somehow blame ourselves, or engage in activity that's kind of fruitless around the difficulty because we're averse to it, we don't want it to be there, and we don't want the feeling of it being there, then we sort of drive ourselves crazy. So this idea of taking a step back and realizing, okay, this is difficult, and these feelings, thoughts, and emotions, impulses I'm experiencing are difficult, but they're not me or mine. They are phenomena that will just arise and pass away, and sort of creating that space to allow it. So one of the things we talk about in MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, is approaching. It's like, can I approach it? Can I allow it to be there, and not react to it? And I don't have to like it, I don't have to love it, but this is how it is. I'm talking as if this is easy. This is in no way easy. This is a really advanced practice, which again, if you look at the Bodhicharyavatara, the sort of the manual on becoming a bodhisattva, or the 7-point mind trainings, they're all working with this area. But it's like, how can we allow and approach rather than avoid and be aversive, which causes us more pain?
I mean, I think that's kind of quite interesting. So moving a little bit more broadly into kind of what people work with when they're learning to meditate. You were talking a bit about the kind of the tendency when you've got a problem to kind of think it through and think it through and think it through and kind of go round and round and round. And I hear a lot of people who, when I talk about the fact that I meditate, they sort of say, oh, I've never been able to meditate because I think too much. And yeah, I guess I'm wondering sort of, how do you respond to that? Or if you're somebody who thinks too much, how do you work with that in meditation? Or can somebody who has a lot of thoughts meditate?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is the number one kind of classic quote I always get when people find out that I meditate or I teach mindfulness. It's like, oh, I'd love to meditate, but I can't empty my mind, you know.
Mm, mm,
Um, so again, I found the work with Satipatthana really useful on this. So in a way, it's thought's job to be thunk, you know, that's the way the mind functions. And going back for a moment to the world of education, we don't want people not to think, do we? I
mm,
mean,
mm,
uh, analysing, comparing, having a critical faculty are really, really important life skills. So there's nothing wrong with thinking, but it's more to do with, as you say, overthinking and perhaps thinking when we don't want to be, thinking at 3 o'clock in the morning when we'd rather be sleeping and things like that. So there's a few different ways we can approach it. I mean, so what I talk about in the book is this sense of changing modes. So often we associate, particularly if we, this is all new to us, we associate the thinking mind with our minds.
mm,
Basically think that's what our mind is, an object that thinks. And of course, consciousness is far more vast, strange, mysterious than that. So it's about learning to make a shift from what we call thinking, which are all the things I just described there, the sort of cognitive faculty, to what we call sensing, which is being in the world of the senses. So that is why meditation, and again Satipatthana, there's so much emphasis first of all on the body, the sensations of the body, the breath, the sensations of the breath. Counting, that's in one of our meditations, that's the first stage, you count. And that's because it gives an obvious object for the mind to pay attention to.
mm,
And that then gives the mind something else to do rather than thinking. So meditation is a form of mind training, really. And as we go on, just as if we train for a marathon or something, as we go on, the objects of meditation can become subtler and subtler. So yes, that sense of, I mean, it's not a problem to think in meditation. The problem is we pay attention to it. Uh,
mm, mm,
and 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 also then that tendency we have to think our thoughts are true when actually the mind is a sense in Buddhism. So there's no difference really between a thought and a sound. They're just phenomena that are arising and passing away, but somehow we kind of predicate that with more importance. So learning to switch from thinking to sensing. So that's, you're sitting in meditation, thought comes up, oh, I've got to take the car to the garage. It's like, okay, clocking that, and then dropping the attention again to perhaps breathing in the belly, or that grounded sense of the legs on the floor, or that spacious feeling of the heart, whatever it is. And even if we have to do that 100 times, that's the training.
mm, mm.
And I remember years ago at Taraloka, 20 years ago now, I did my first Anapanasati retreat with Viveka, and she said on that retreat, celebrate every moment of awareness. So usually when we realize our mind has wandered, we usually feel ashamed and like, oh, I've done something wrong. But
Mm,
actually that awareness that the mind has wandered is a moment to be celebrated, because
mm,
at that
mm,
point
mm,
you're noticing what's going on in your mind and you're making a choice. So yeah, celebrating every moment of awareness.
mm. There is that thing about actually, once you have some awareness of what's going on in your mind, you start to have more choice in terms of what you can do.
Yeah, and choice brings freedom, so
Mm,
that and we always have a choice. It might be a limited choice, but we
mm.
always have a choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So you mentioned Tara Loka, you're going to be coming here in October, is it, to
November.
November to do a retreat on mindfulness. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking about the benefits of meditation and mindfulness in the everyday world. Why should somebody go on retreat? Why should somebody go outside of their everyday life?
Ah, really
Yeah.
interesting. Really interesting. Um, well, when I talk about retreats, and particularly weekend retreats, I always like to refer to the story. So, and I was told this story by Sadhanandi, who used to be the chair of Tara Loka,
Mm.
very accomplished teacher, and she was telling me the story that a person asked Sangharajita, who's the founder and teacher of our order and Triratna movement, can going on a weekend retreat change your life? And Sangharajita said, I don't know if it can help you change your life, but it can help you turn a corner. And I've always loved that
Mm.
because going on a weekend retreat, just stepping outside your normal conditions, maybe what we call in the mindfulness world autopilot, the sort of normal going through the motions routine. You're coming somewhere that is supportive. I mean, and if you've never been to Tara Loka, just to say it's incredibly comfortable and the food is great. So yeah, so it's a really supportive condition. Obviously weather dependent in this country, but there's beautiful gardens, beautiful walks and countryside nearby. So it's a supportive condition. And by stepping out of our lives for a few days, it's just a few days, again, it gives us a different perspective. So we leave the sort of the normal conditions and we step into a space, we create a space to ourselves to step into. And then perhaps we're somebody who's meditating and meditating quite regularly, but there's something about having the opportunity to do some more meditation, to meet like-minded people, women, and have these conversations about life,
Mm.
to explore and have time in nature. All of this can seem really, really rich and can be really, really restoring and refreshing. And so it's not, it's not a spa, it's not kind of, that kind of break. But what it does is it gives us a space to renew ourselves and to reset ourselves and to give the mind a bit of a rest, really, and allow it to gather itself. And usually at the end of a weekend retreat, I feel like, well, one, I feel like, oh, I really needed that. And two, I feel I've got renewed energy, I've got renewed confidence and focus. And yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go back into life with a bit more kind of vigor and joy.
That sounds fantastic. And do you need to have an established meditation practice to go on retreat?
No, I mean, not on the introductory weekends at Tara Loka, so that's the one I'll be leading. So we'll teach you to meditate, and it won't be hours and hours in the shrine room like you get at some places. It will be a balance. I mean, I think this is the real gift that our teacher, Sangharajita, has given Triratna, which owns Tara Loka, is a sense of balance in life. So there will be time to meditate. There'll be quiet times to sit with a cup of tea and a book. There'll be a chance to explore nature. There'll be a chance to talk to others. So it's a very kind of rounded and balanced way in. It's not just about meditating for 7 hours a day at this
Mm.
level.
Mm. Okay, great. Um, what would you say to somebody who is thinking about coming on retreat or who's thinking about taking up some sort of meditation or mindfulness? What would you say to them about maybe a piece of advice about how to go into it well.
Okay. Well, first of all, it would just be encouragement. I mean, I've always loved this idea in Buddhist meditation about come and see for yourself, so test it in your own experience. I think personally, I mean, there's a lot of things available online now, but personally, if you could go to some sort of face-to-face setting and learn from a teacher, I think that's a really good way to do it, partly because it won't just be about you learning the practice, but you'll be, you'll be introduced to a community of people doing it. And I know, I work at a Buddhist center myself, and I know that when we're all in the shrine room meditating, there's a different sort of atmosphere than when we're meditating alone. And if somebody's thinking about coming on a weekend retreat, I'd just say go for it. It's a weekend out of your life. If you hate it, you never have to do it again. But don't let that hold you back. Just sort of have a go. And there's lots of flexibility in the program, so there's lots of time to enjoy different aspects of having a weekend to yourself. And invest in that time in yourself. Life is so busy, there are so many competing demands, and a weekend out of your life, it's not very much really. So if you can make that time, I think you'll really reap some rich rewards from it.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed talking to you, Natalia.